The Emmett Fox writing for today starts by requesting that we read Psalm 91. So I'm going to read Psalm 91 from the Lamsa translation. And before I do, I want to mention Sister Pepper, who founded the church from which we came, always recommended this as a prayer or a reading when you needed protection. He who dwells in the protection of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, He is my refuge and my fortress, my God. In Him will I trust. Surely He shall deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from vain gossip. He will cover you with His feathers, and under His wings you shall trust. His truth shall be your shield and buckler. Shield is the kind of shield that soldiers wear, and a buckler was a small shield they had on their arm to protect their arm. You shall not be afraid for the terror by night, nor for the arrow that flies by day, nor for the conspiracy that spreads in darkness, nor for the pestilence that wastes at noonday. Thousands shall fall at your side, and 10,000 at your right hand, but it shall not come near you. Only with your eyes shall you behold the reward of the wicked. For thou, O Lord, art my trust. Thou hast established thy habitation in the highest. There shall no evil befall you, neither shall any plague come near your dwelling. For he shall give his angels charge over you to keep you in all your ways. They shall bear you up in their hands, lest you dash your foot against a stone. You shall tread upon the viper and adder, you shall trample underfoot the lion and the great serpent. Because he has loved me, therefore will I deliver him. I will set him on high, because he has known my name. He shall call upon me, and I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will deliver him and honor him. With long life will I satisfy him and show him my salvation.
And the reading from Emmett Fox is titled Our Promise. 1,000 shall fall at thy side, and 10,000 at thy right hand, but it shall not come nigh thee. Only with thine eyes shalt thou behold and see the reward of the wicked. This clause has been taken to indicate some kind of favoritism on the part of God, whereas of course such a thing is impossible. It means simply that those who pray are saved from trouble that would otherwise overtake them. And that does, in fact, overtake those who do not pray. Because thou hast made the Lord, which is my refuge, even the Most High, thy habitation, there shall no evil befall thee, neither shall any plague come nigh thy dwelling. In the Bible, the word promise is the name given to a statement of some spiritual law. So a Bible promise is a statement of the consequences that naturally follow from certain states of consciousness. If Boyle's law were written in the Bible idiom, it would read something like this. As I live, saith the Lord, whenever thou shalt double the pressure of a gas, thou shalt half the volume, temperature remaining constant. In the language of natural science, our Bible promise would run, by meditating regularly on the presence of God with you and directing your life in accordance with that fact, you become immune from any kind of danger.
So today, my topic is discovering and following your sacred compass. And Fox had a lot to say about it. Part of where he went in other writing, and I thought this was, I hadn't seen this before today, and I was sort of, well, again, not terribly surprised that it fits with what we're talking about. What Fox says is we experience life based on our own concept of things, and thus no two people will experience life, will see life, or see God the same way. And in some cases, it's like people are seeing very different worlds. So, thus, what we expect to see, we tend to make our own world around it and from it. So we're actually creating a world, our path, our walk from our own thoughts. And the problem is that if our thinking is faulty, and I'll get into this a bit farther, then what we create is faulty as well. But the wonderful part is that we do have access to what we'll call a sacred compass, that if we set aside our false beliefs and are open to guidance from the divine, then we can be led on a path that gives us greater happiness, greater purpose, greater passion in our life. Because when we step out of our own limits and are what the Quakers call tender to the message from the divine, then we have a whole different way of knowing where to walk, how to walk. Sort of like if you don't know about a sacred compass, or if you don't feel you have, or don't think you have, or don't allow yourself to have a connection with the divine, then they just came in. But the community cats are making a howling. So if you're out of touch with the divine, you don't know there's a divine, a sacred compass that you've got, then it's like walking in a trackless forest, trying to find your way home, and all you get is the occasional glimpse through the darkness of the trees overhead of a sun. And you don't know exactly where it is, you have a rough idea, you don't know exactly where you are, where you're going. If you're really savvy, you can look for the moss and figure out where the moss is on which side of the tree. But if it's a really thick forest, there's moss on all sides of the tree. So it's like, how do you find the path that is your sacred path? J. Brent Bill, an author, in the book Sacred Compass, and I meant to bring it here out to wave at you, writes, "Many times I wish God spoke as clearly and as obviously as Google Maps or a GPS. But God doesn't. So we have to find our way using our sacred compass. It operates in our souls, and if we allow it, it guides us to a life full of adventure, full of meaning, full of feeling comfortable in this world." So, standard operating procedure is to carefully listen to the God who speaks to us, but it's not picking up the phone and hearing a voice. It can be senses in our bodies, stories, our imagination, our inclination, opportunities that present themselves, dreams, hearts, voices from unexpected places, which leads to a prayer from St. Patrick. God be in my head and in my understanding. God be in my eyes and in my looking. God be in my mouth and my speaking. God be in my heart and in my thinking. God be in my end and at my departed. I'm sorry, God be at my end and at my departing. So, in one sense, the sacred compass is well hidden. It's well hidden as long as we're trying to think, as long as we're keeping ourselves, if you will, tied or handcuffed to this earth plane, or to the false belief that the rational is the only thing that's relevant. So, how do you create space? Well, first of all, the Quakers call it listening to the still small voice that's within, because they do believe, as I do, that God is in us, God is of us, we are of God, God is around us, we are around God. But that doesn't mean that God talks to us through a megaphone. So create space in your life where you can listen to that which is unexpected, to that which is quiet. Learn to discern, to be tender, to be sensitive, whether it's by sensing or waiting or acting. And Bill writes of a case he and his wife were at a grocery checkout. He's a pastor at a Quaker church. And they noticed in front of them was one of their church members, a widow lady trying to take care of 3 kids and hold down a job. And they noticed that in her cart was the bare minimum of what you needed to survive food-wise. And he said, my wife and I looked at each other, and without saying a word, I said, can we buy your groceries for you today? They both had the leading. They both knew without speaking what it was they were to do. I suspect those of you in this congregation have encountered situations like that where you just knew to do or say something without having any rational basis for it. You also need to be flexible in terms of where the input comes from, how the input presents itself. In my experience anyway, it's not all that often that the direction, the nudge has words to it. In one case that I remember, I just felt a dig in my ribs and saw an invisible hand pointing to tell me to turn onto a street that I wasn't planning to turn onto. And above, I don't know if I should say above all, but it's okay to feel spiritually lost sometimes. Because today is the only thing that's real and tomorrow is a fog. Emmett Fox talks about that. But there are times, first of all, if you feel lost, there's no fault, there's no condemnation from the divine, because we're doing the best we can. But we can acknowledge that we need a little more direction from our sacred compass. The way the author Bill points it, J. Brent Bill is his full name, if we allow it, the sacred compass will direct us to our spiritual true north, a deeper integration of our spiritual walk with our mind and with our overall connection with God and the earth. He likes to think of it as a pilgrimage, that we're on a pilgrimage, but we don't know where the next step is. And sometimes we think we're going to be stepping this way, and all of a sudden, here's a side path, and we get directed onto that side path. He uses as a contrary example his own experience. He grew up in an evangelical church, and he explains that they had been taught that God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. The problem, he notes, is that it was the same plan for everybody. You grow up in the church, you don't ask any questions. You go off, get schooling, or get a trade. You come home, you marry someone from the church. You have kids, you raise them in the church. And that, is one size fits all. And his point, and I make it all the time, there are many paths home. And our job is to follow the leadings for our path, for our purpose, for our walk through this life. I came across a writer, Amy Frinkholm, who wrote, "I'm very hesitant to say that God wanted me to do something, and yet I have experienced times of extraordinary clarity when not only the direction I should take seemed clear, but the workings of something beyond myself, the softening up of my whole self in order to accept a previously unacceptable direction took place." And she goes on to talk about how she'd always been clear that this was her vocational path. And then, through a series of inputs, shall we say, she found herself doing almost a right-hand turn into something she had never considered, would not have considered. That's what she talks about, the unacceptable. There are so many ways that we can interfere with the guidance we receive from our spiritual compass, our sacred compass. Bill is mentioning one, the ritual, the indoctrination that you've had. Frickholm mentions another, this is what my plan is. And then there's those of you who are familiar with Lift, there's the problem of the lies that life has taught you. This last couple of weeks, I've worked with a couple of people who have been fed the lie that God hates them, there's no room for them in God's love, there's no room for them in heaven. All they can do is suffer through this life because that's all God wants them. Talk about an obstruction to being able to hear and see the directions from your spiritual compass, because you've already been ground into the dirt. So one thing that in following your spiritual compass or looking for it or being open to it that you need to do is find the lies that are keeping you from being able to fully access the still small voice within you that's guiding you on the way. Ideally, by being tender, by increasing our sensitivity to the still small voice, to the leadings, to the nudge in the ribs, to the decision to do something that you've never done before, gives us a greater sense of courage, or not even recognizing you need courage, to step into tomorrow, the fog of tomorrow, the uncertainty of a future other than what we have laid out or envisioned or been told we can never have. The more we can follow the leadings, the firmer we will find our comfort with following the direction of the sacred compass, of following the direction that helps us connect more thoroughly with the divine. Ideally, we can ultimately train ourselves to walk in a constant state of awareness, of discernment, and knowing when the discernment is coming from divine reality rather than worldly falsity. So how can we discern? How can we check our inputs to know we're not being led astray, or that we're doing our best to follow truth. First of all, writings and teachers that are presented to us and who are speaking out of God's love. And then what I call presentational prayer. I do one every morning, sometime shortly after I get up. Basically, it's, okay, here I am, God, show me what to do today that can carry your work forward, can carry me where I'm supposed to be. In other words, you're not regarding yourself as the ultimate arbiter. It is good to share time and conversation with spiritual friends, which is what we do here, because often they have wisdom to share, or you have wisdom to share for them. There's certainly value in engaging in religious rituals and practices which have meaning for you and enable you to center and be more cognizant of small inputs. Richard Rohr recommends meditation. And of course, there's just going out and sitting quietly in nature and letting nature talk to you. By following our spiritual compass, by doing our best to hear the nudges, then we will find our way more easily to our life's purposes, because often there's a couple of writers who say, it's not just one purpose in life. Maybe you're lucky enough to have just one. Or maybe that's not lucky, I don't know. But it's possible to, at each stage of life, have another specific divine purpose or a divine passion to carry out. And ideally, by following and being comfortable following our sacred compass, we can feel stable and at ease even when we are in transition from one life situation to another, from one life calling or one life purpose to another. Fox talks about the spiritual compass as a way of reclaiming our spirit selves in the midst of our sacred life, our secular lives. And he talks about these processes in their discernment, use the guidance of the teachings of Jesus and other, I'll call them gurus, other speakers of truth, plus our own spiritual, personal experience, maintaining direct connection with the spiritual realm. To remind you, the Orthodox Church talks about unceasing prayer. And I say to you, you can have unceasing prayer without having to say words. It's just the maintaining of your connection as best as possible between your physical self and your spiritual self. Know that your spiritual strength comes from within. It is not dependent on outside sources or outside coaching. It is your connection with this divine power and cultivating that inner strength, that inner power that the sacred compass can guide us to. So in following your sacred compass, some rules that I've sort of put together. Don't force the issue or the direction. I call it, if you find yourself swimming upstream, better stop and take another think. Anytime things are difficult, you may be trying to force a direction that is not indicated by the sacred compass. Now, the Quakers use the term "as the way opens" and being tender in the spirit. I've used tender in the spirit earlier, but their idea is you allow the divine to open the door or to show the way. And the way opens without substantial effort on your part. If you're working too hard, that may not be the way that the divine direction is indicating. Within that context, when you get a nudge, it may not be in words. I don't know if I've had but maybe one or two big nudges which came in words. Sometimes it's just a feeling. Sometimes, as I mentioned earlier, it's a nudge in the ribs. Sometimes it's a door opening and you say, oh gosh, there's something here I've got to do. And do understand that your sacred journey, in most cases, comes in incremental steps. Little steps. You know, the journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. You take the step that you're shown today, or this minute. And maybe there'll be another step in a couple minutes, or maybe tomorrow, or maybe next week. You do what you can with what you're shown, and you allow yourself the patience to move on without being sure what the ultimate arrival is or what your next purpose is. God knows I never expected to be doing lift. I never expected to be doing this. But the divine had his own plan, or her own plan, as the case may be. And the same for every one of you. Who knows what your next step is? Who knows what tomorrow brings? Now, that reminds me of the Lamsa translation, because none of us know where we're going to be tomorrow or where we're going to be when this stage of existence comes to an end. Lamsa's translation of what Jesus said on the cross is so different from what Western Bibles say. He says that what Jesus cried was, my God, for this was I spared." Every one of us is being spared for something. And it needn't be something big or fantastic. Maybe it's raising a child. Maybe it's being there for someone who's hurting. Maybe it, like Brill's talk at the grocery store, that momentary purpose was to provide the money to that widow when she was so desperately low. We don't know. We don't know what tomorrow will bring. We don't know what the next minute will bring. But be tender to the leaning. Be tender to the leaning. I still struggle with that on occasion. And there are times when I'm reasonably sure I missed the mark. And all I can say is, sorry, God, I was doing the best I can. So, in following your sacred compass, remember that there are many paths home. And the one that you're watching here with your best friend may have nothing to do with the one you're directed to. And it's entirely possible, as Robert Frost says, that you may be called to take the road less traveled. Actually, I think all of us here have been called to take the road less traveled, or we wouldn't be sharing here together. Now, the author of Sacred Compass calls those of us seeking to use the Sacred Compass pilgrims, because we're under serious intention to discern the path step by step that God has for our lives. But we need to constantly watch for signs and signposts. I have a friend who's walked the Appalachian Trail several times, and he talks about how easy it is to lose the trail, because there's the occasional slash mark on a tree or a paint daub on a rock. And the several times he's taken the walk, more than a few times, 2 or 3 hours down the road, he realizes he's not on the trail, and he has to completely walk back to where he missed a turn. Ideally, that won't happen to us often, but we are human, and it will happen to us. As you're doing this walk, do let your life speak of your walk by the actions you take and the words you speak. And then, sort of as a close, I came across a prayer from Thomas Merton, which feels so true to this. My Lord God, I have no idea where I'm going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself, and the fact that I think I'm following your will does not mean I'm actually doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does, in fact, please you. And I hope that I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. So, that's what I have to say. Anyone with a contribution?
That's my favorite talk of yours, hands down. Thank you so much. That was just resonant with me like crazy. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, really awesome, Brian. I want to just say a couple things. You said something about we may go off the trail. Anytime we feel that hold on, let me put this better. We're on the trail anytime that we know we are. There is no off the trail. You cannot be out of God's sight. You can't be. You can turn your attention away from any place that has light in it and think that you are off the trail, think that you are gone, think that you're done. But I was remembering today when I was homeless, and I was learning to very deeply appreciate anything that I could, and getting onto the bus every day and every night, going to and from work downtown, and looking around me and connecting with people and noticing people and just appreciating where each of us was in our walk, in our lives. Amazing. I had amazing conversations, and in those moments, in those times, I was on the path. Sometimes I think we're too, like, we have to go from here to here. It's really from here to here, or here to here, whichever way you frame it. But it's not like we're not there ever. I love what Abraham Hicks says: you can never get it right and you can never get it done. And so the only compass that I hold to, and I'm not in a tight way, but the only compass that I have experientially come to, and I love it, is how I feel and how what I sense. That's my compass. And so many times I have been like ticked off, and I'm like, or I'm pushing too hard, just like you were talking about, Brian, and I stop. Or I respond to it with a higher feeling of like, tired of being angry, I'm just going to do something else. And then something magical happens because I've shifted the energy. Also, everything that you talked about that we need to do, being, I forget the word you used, but being soft, opening, allowing, these are all the feminine. This is all the feminine. And back, I think it was the Essenes, Star Child can tell us, but I think it was the Essenes who were the last before the Catholic Church came in and said, we're getting rid of the feminine. We just want the masculine, and we want you to not have that instinct, that intuition, that download. We want you to have to come to us for everything. So if you think about it, it's been that long that we've been enculturated to be without the feminine. And with it, I think our immersion in our own marriage with the divinity is going to be so much easier. It's already starting.
Next week's talk fits right in with what you were talking about, the mystery of allowing God. So somebody else with a contribution. Yes, Ellie. Okay, you got it.
It's interesting. I love the talk, by the way, but it's interesting how what you brought out. I have an oracle that it's called Woodland Wardens, and of course, it's talking about these cute little critters, And I had Donovan draw a card, and it's the chipmunk and laurel. So it's just a picture of a chipmunk and laurel, and the word on it is success. And you use like several phrases from the card in your talk today. It was funny. So it basically says the chipmunk and laurel symbolize a new venture that will surely lead to success. The chipmunk often takes the road less traveled. You brought that up a lot. Finding hidden pathways and adventure along the way. The laurel is a symbol of victory, used to crown the winners in the ancient Olympic Games. Together, they tell us to take charge of our destiny, carve our own path, and find success. Forge a unique path toward your desires. The road to achieving your goals is hardly ever straight and easy, but the journey is ultimately rewarding. What success is in my life can I celebrate? And how can I carve my own path and live my truth? Those were the questions on that. And when you were sharing that verse out of the Lamas Bible, is that what it's called? About Messiah's words, for this was I spared. That's also, when you break that verse down, that's also what it says in the Hebrew. So it's not, forsaken as, in the Western thought. That's one of the many reasons I like the Hebrew, because it takes you into that Eastern mindset a lot of times. And, as you were talking about feelings being sensitive, as I mentioned, last week, the Hebrew deals with the five senses. We all have the five senses. But I've always thought, there's more than just the five physical senses. And I've had talks with, with other people, and those, no, there's only five senses. And I'm like, well, what about discernment? What about clear, all the clairs? What about, and there's more than five clairs too. But anyway, what about all of those? Aren't those senses? And of course, I don't get an answer unless it's people that are like-minded, anyway. And then the other thing, you were mentioning about pilgrims, and signs and signposts. I think it's, very interesting, for those that, watch movies or know scriptures, or, wherever your path takes you, there are many movies. And I talk about this, The Pilgrim's Progress. You're probably familiar with that one. Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter. The list can go on. Narnia. And all of those movies, have those individual paths. that people have to take to find their own way. In one of the tarot books I have, you know, one of the things is called, the pilgrim starts out on her path. Another book says the shadow witch starts out on her path. So all these descriptive words are talking about the same type of person starting it on their path. Anyway, awesome talk. I took more notes this time than some of your other talks. So yes, very, very, very deep talk. And I'm sure I'll go back and probably add more notes to it. So thank you, Brian.
Thank you. Anybody else with a contribution? Dave, yes. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I agree, Brian. That was a sensational talk, and I took a ton of notes as well. And for the sake of brevity, I'll try to just do the best I can. But there was a lot to unpack. But the thing that I was sort of like that sort of resonated me perhaps the most is that like I often feel like I'm sort of like off path or sort of like out of alignment or like it's like everyone else, everybody's in on it except me. I kind of feel like kind of lost sometimes. And I'm thinking like, man, and and I really have a hard time with that, particularly given the fact that I think I'm a pretty smart guy. I've had a wealth of life experiences. I've been blessed to be associated with some amazing folks like yourself who have kind of helped me on my path on so many ways that I can't even count them. But that being said, I still find myself having a very difficult time trying to discern where the truth is, because there's so many things out there. And like I said, like you said, I should say, somebody can look at the same thing, including this talk, or including whatever. And we seem to be inundated with so much stuff every day. And as somebody who has a journalism background, I grew up at a time where, you reported the facts and then you just kind of play it straight down the middle, and then let the readers or the viewers decide, where they stand on. Nowadays, everybody's got a slant. And so it's like everybody's got, and it seems like everything's to the extreme. And two more things quickly is that, I came across a couple things this week that really kind of caught my attention. One is that, in thinking about the extremes and everything that we encounter every day, particularly with all the news and fake news or whatever is passing for news, we oftentimes are kind of look at it as like black and white, and then they say, well, you got black and white, and then the middle gray area. But then I was listening to like a podcast earlier this past week where they said, no, that's the wrong way to look at it. Between black and white is a rainbow of colors. It's not gray. And so when you think about that, that really kind of gives you like, oh yeah, there's more. There's a litany of ways to look at things. You know what I mean? And so that kind of really sat with me. And then the other thing is sort of reminded me what Emmy was talking about. Another podcast that I listened to this week, and this really kind of blew me away, and I need to do some more research on it. There was a lady who lost her husband a few years ago and thought that this guy was he was her life. Lost him, and then even though she was like a clinical psychologist and a really kind of very advanced person in her field, but she was very science oriented. But then after her husband passed away, she discovered unequivocally, I mean, so much so that she said she had 100% certainty that we can communicate with the people who have crossed over. And she had and she thinks she could prove it, based on her personal experience scientifically. Yes, we can cross through the veil and communicate back and forth. But one of the things she said was that regarding the senses, she goes, "Yeah, we think that we just have the five senses, But she claims that there's like 36 senses that we actually have that go so far above and beyond that our five senses that you can hardly even and you really can't put it into words, which is why most people kind of miss out on it. But one last thing, if I may, is that the thing that I still have probably the most difficult time is that in trying to figure out. You made a reference about saying that hoping that you are pleasing the divine. Based on the things I've gone through, I try to convince myself, okay, this is where I'm supposed to be on any number of levels, but I'm still trying to figure out a way to please me. I think I'm doing what divine has had me do. I think because I don't think I would have put myself in the positions I am in so many levels on my own accord. So I think there has to be some underlying reason why I've gone and navigate the course that I've gone through. But I was like, okay, assuming that's the case, let me in on it so I can, join in on some of the fun myself. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, let's move into oh yes, Leah.
I just want to say real quick that, yeah, there is no right or wrong. It's just your path. But on that path is learning to trust yourself. If you have an urge to go down a different street like you did, Brian, you trust it yourself to know, okay, I'll do it. So it's learning to trust yourself, not doubting, because doubting is allowing the negativity to come in. It's trusting yourself. And if it doesn't quite go the way you think it should, doesn't mean it was wrong. It was something you had to look at, what have you. But that's the hardest thing a lot of people have trouble with is trusting themselves. If you feel this is right, and then do it. Don't backtrack thinking, oh, maybe I shouldn't have. You don't know. So trust yourself. Yes, use discernment. There's nothing wrong with that. But even with that, you've got to learn to trust yourself, being on your path, no one else's. So even though they're doing blah, 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 let them. That's their path. Your path is normal for you, and nothing wrong with that. Thank you.
In Lyft, one of the installs we have to make for a lot of people is it's right, safe, okay, and appropriate for me to follow a path that differs from everyone else, which is what I think we started talking. Let's go into our silence, folks, and see what there is we need to hear from the divine, and then I'll call you back with a short ding. Let us come to a close then. If you can read the chat, looks like we really need to keep Norm and Lori are in prayer right now. So we thank the divine for watching over us, for teaching us, for guiding us, to helping us be more sensitive to the guidance of the sacred compass. We thank the divine for all the good in our lives, for our sustenance, for our safety. We thank the divine for guiding us to be ever closer and ever more effective in representing this great love. We give full honor to the divine for all the good in our lives. We say thank you, thank you, thank you, and amen. So folks, see you next week. Have a great week, do good work, and keep praising God. Bye-bye for now.